wanted to get this off real quickly before I have to go to work. Um, I know people don't like it sometimes when I read from articles, but that's probably the problem because people don't read enough and they rely too much on what they see on TV and on mainstream news. But then again, most of us know that already. Here's an article written in 2003 by Elliot Weinberger. Has been translated in 18 different languages, written, published in major newspapers, except not in American newspapers. And that article from 2003 is as relevant today as it was then. He begins by saying that in the last 50 years, we have grown accustomed to governments whose policies on specific issues may be good or bad, but which essentially institute incremental change to the status quo. The major exceptions to the status quo have been Thatcher and Reagan, but even their programs of dismantling systems of social welfare seem in retrospect mild in comparison to what is happening in the United States under George Bush, or more exactly, the ruling junta that tells Bush what to do and what to say. It is unquestionably the most radical government in modern American history. One whose ideology and actions have become so pervasive and so unquestionably mirrored in the mass media that the population seems to have forgotten what normal is. It is the first administration to openly declare a policy of unilateral aggression, a pa Americana, where presence of allies, whether England or Bulgaria, is agreeable but unimportant, where international treaties no longer apply to the United States, and where, for the first time in history, this country reserves the right to non-defensive, preemptive strikes against any nation on earth when it so desires. It is the first since the internment of Japanese Americans in World War II to enact special laws for a specific ethnic group. Non-citizen young Muslim men are now required to register and subject themselves to interrogation. In Guantanamo Bay, where it is said that they are now preparing execution chambers, hundreds of foreign nationals, including a 13-year-old and a man who claims to be 100, have been kept for almost 2 years in a limbo that clearly contravenes the Geneva Conventions. Personal update here, of course, this article was written in 2003 and these people have been in limbo for longer than 2 years. Similar to the Reagan era, it is an administration openly devoted to helping the rich and ignoring the poor. One that has turned the budget surplus into a massive deficit through its combination of enormous tax cuts for the wealthy, particularly those who earn more than $1 million per year, and increases in defense spending. And although Republicans always campaign on less government, it has created the largest new government bureaucracy in history, the Department of Homeland Security. The Financial Times of England, hardly a hotbed of leftists, has categorized this economic policy as the lunatics taking over the asylum. Most of all, Elliot Weinberg writes, most of all, America doesn't feel like America anymore. At the airports of provincial cities, there are frequent announcements in that assuring disembodied voice of science fiction films. The Department of Homeland Security advises that the terror alert is now orange. Every few weeks there is an announcement that another terrorist attack is imminent and citizens are urged to take ludicrous measures, such as sealing their windows against biological or chemical attacks, and to report on their suspicious neighbors. The Pentagon has instituted the Total Information Awareness program, only to be changed into Total Terrorist Awareness program, or whatever they want to call it now. The war in Iraq has been the most extreme manifestation of this new America, and it's almost a casebook study in totalitarian techniques. First, an enemy is created by blatant lies that are endlessly repeated until the population believes it. In this case, that Iraq was linked to the attack on the World Trade Center and that it possesses vast weapons of mass destruction and so on. Iraq. And then the War of Liberation, entirely portrayed by the mass media in terms of our heroic troops, with little or no imagery of casualties or devastation on either side, and with morale-inspiring scripted news items, such as the topping of the statue of Saddam Hussein in the Baghdad Square, the rescue of Private Lynch, and now I suppose we could add to that the Pat Tillman story. It's very difficult, this is Elliot speaking, it's very difficult to speak of what is happening in America without resorting to the cliches of anti-Americanism that have lost their meaning over the decades, but have now come true. Perhaps one can only recite the facts, and I have mentioned only some of them here. This is quite simply the most frightening American administration in modern times, one that is appalling to both the left and the traditional conservatives. This junta is unabashed in its imperialistic ambitions. It is enacting an Orwellian state of perpetual war. It is a dismantling, or it is an attempt of dismantling of some of the most fundamental tenets of American democracy. It is acting without opposition within the government, and it is operating so quickly and on so many fronts that it has overwhelmed and almost exhausted any popular opposition. Perhaps it cannot be stopped, but the first step towards slowing it down is the recognition that this is an American government unlike any other in this country's history, and one for whom democracy is an obstacle. Well, okay, gotta go off to work. See you later.